We're live. We're live and recording. So hello, YouTube. We'll talk about sports. So David and Michael, what do you and Carolyn, what is the role of sports in our society today? That's the first question that I wrote. That we can open with that question. Yeah.
That's pretty fascinating because so I've never really been super into sports. There have been moments in my life where I felt attached to the game. So I went to UNC Chapel Hill, and the Duke UNC rivalry was big. So often when those games would come on, I remember everyone at my college would huddle around the TV, and we're all just waiting. The fourth quarter, 5 minutes left. Who's going to win? So there's kind of an excitement there. But in general, I feel like I've never been super passionate about it. So it always intrigues me. When I see that I'm very different from a lot of other people, that's always an interesting opportunity to explore. What is that? Is that just sort of my personality, how I grew up or something? But yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts.
Why do you think you've never been very interested in sports?
So I've always wondered the opposite. Why are other people so interested?
Well, I guess you can flip it on its head. Yeah.
But I guess a lot of it is, I feel like, camaraderie. People there's a sense of community and a sense of common purpose. Everyone goes to the game together. They all kind of want the same team to win. So they all kind of have a common mission. So I feel like it brings people together. I feel like there's also just an innate human desire to compete, and sports, you're pushing your body to its limits, and there's just some excitement in watching people push themselves to their limits. And I guess that's really doesn't even just pertain to sports, right? That pertains to everything in life. Who can be the best musician, or who can be the best artist. So I feel like there's that aspect of just trying to be the best, but it's just sort of in a physical aspect instead of intellectual or artistic aspect. And yeah, the sense of community that you get just watching it with the rest of the fans.
Yeah, I was. We had a small discussion in the chat today while I was posting the questions. I mean, something that people brought up was tribalism, right? That it kind of stokes our tribalist instincts, I guess. Yeah. Everybody wants to belong, and this is a way of belonging.
There's more than one way to be tribal. So why sports?
Well, something that someone pointed out is that, or maybe I pointed out in a way, but our discussion in any case led to the fact that sports and religion, politics, all these things that there's an element, not just these three things, but these are three examples of things that give people a sense of that they're part of a certain community. And sports can be one thing in society that gives you that sense that you're part of one community. Not everybody else, but you're part of this little tribe here. If you're a fan of, it can be, it can be anything. But if you're a fan of this sport team, you're part of that community, right? The community of fans of that sport team, and that's your tribe, right?
Yeah. I guess a lot of it just has to do with a matter of identity. Like when you grew up, did your parents, did you watch a lot with your parents and friends? A lot of it's kind of circular. It's you're invested in that community because you were just always invested in your community because that's how you grew up and that's how it's always been, right? So I feel like a lot of what you're saying isn't necessarily particular to sports specifically, but really any sort of activity that you grow up doing. and you have like a lot of friends or a large group of people that are all into it.
There's part of it. Yeah, I think sports in particular, like I said, there's a little bit there are elements of it. Sports are not religion, but there's an element of sports that overlaps with religion. It's
Yeah.
just in the same way that sports are not politics. I mean, those are two different things, but there's an overlapping element, right? The fact that you might want to belong to a certain tribe, right? That's something that you find in politics, but that's also certainly something that you find in sports. So it kind of overlaps with different things.
But there has to be something to the physical aspect of the game. It's like, because you can be tribal in an infinite number of ways, right? You could be tribal about the food you eat. You could be tribal about, I don't know, the TV shows you watch. So you could be tribal about an infinite number of things. So there has to be something about, I think the physical aspect of sports. It's like you're competing, but in a very visual and transparent way. Yeah, I don't
Yeah, I
know.
think that side comes down to like the action of it, all the action involved.
What about you, David? What are your thoughts? And are you a sports guy?
Well, I play tennis regularly. In fact, 3 or 4 times a week. But I don't watch a lot of sports, and I'll watch a little bit of Wimbledon, and I'll watch the Super Bowl every year. And sports to me, and my thinking, is very important. I mean, team play and learning how to lose is just as important as learning how to win. And losing with a team or winning with a team, it's all very, very important. And I don't know what it's like there, but I know that our local newspaper, I've always been tempted to do a graph, say in a year's time, showing the number of column inches devoted to sports, high school sports, and the number of column inches devoted to academics.
Sports are way more. Yeah.
Sports is grossly more. And the unfortunate reality of it is a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of people who participate in college sports will make a career of it. A tiny percentage. But and it's still, I think it's important, but it's out of proportion to me, for my thinking, not everybody else, obviously.
But people do it. I mean, sports is done more for fun than because it's useful, right? So it's like, yeah, I guess the question is, yeah, why are people so fascinated with sports? Yeah, David, do you have any? There has to be a reason. I mean, it's hugely popular, right?
It seems, I think a lot of it is like kind of the risk of it, that you may or may not get the result you're hoping for.
It's kind of like the feeling of gambling a little bit, or like
a little bit, yeah.
But you can gamble in ways other than sports. Yeah, I think it's probably more than one thing. Like, I think there's the exercise element of it. It kind of feels good when you're pushing your body to the limit. Growing stronger physically. I feel like there's just a good feeling to sports. Like when you play a really good competitive basketball game and it's finally over, like, you get like a certain endorphin rush. It just feels good, right? You got some good exercise, you bonded with your teammates, you had to work together. It's just a good feeling.
Yeah, I mean, we've already mentioned. I mean, we've already mentioned a bunch of reasons why people are drawn to sports. Maybe there isn't like one particular reason, why people are drawn to sports. It's all of these things, combined make it very appealing, and people might find the appeal, in different things, different one or more of all these different reasons. I mean, I've been writing it down here. We've already
Yeah.
talked about at least seven reasons why people are drawn to sports in a short amount of time. So I mean, there's a lot of things.
I feel like us being like, intellectuals, like often intellectuals like to say what is the reason for something or what are the three reasons, but often it's a little bit of a bunch of reasons. And that's kind of less satisfying intellectually because it's like, why do people like sports? Well, a little this, a little this, a little this. Maybe intellectually it's not as satisfying, but it might be more accurate. Yeah.
It's okay to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, that's true, but it's not even about that. It's about the fact that in this case, I mean, there's not three reasons. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of
Yeah.
them that certainly we can say like which ones are the most important ones. But another thing, one answer that I have for your question, David, is that sports are a lot more fun than academics for most people. Most people are not really, that interested in reading about the academics of this high school or the other. They're more interested, and it's also more simple. Oh, who
No,
won the football game, right? So it's
no,
more
no
fun,
doubt.
more simple. So those are perhaps some of the reasons.
Well, you can have academic competitions.
You could,
Like when I was in high school, there was science quiz bowl,
you
for
could, but
example.
what do you think is going to sell more tickets? The high school football game or the math
For-
Olympics?
For me, the math Olympic, but
I know,
I mean,
I
you
know.
guys
That's why I'm
obviously-
bringing. That's why I'm bringing it up because I wanted to provoke you.
Well, like I
But,
find like the
but come on,
spelling
Frank.
bee, like I find academic competitions and also chess, like personally, I find it way more fascinating. Like,
All right, this is a philosophical question in itself, in a way, but it's something that I do like. I always say, in my opinion, chess is a sport, and I don't know what a sport is. I mean, like, what's the definition of
that's
sport?
just linguistics. Like, is
Exactly,
chess a sport?
exactly. But when
Any
people
game
say
you can smoke and drink while playing is not a sport.
but to me, I think that chess is a sport, and but that chess highlights the fact that sports are games. That's essentially what a sport is. It's a game, and while we're talking about sports, we can also talk about games. I think that's part of what we like about sports. We like games. People like games. There's something about the human psychology that we like games.
Yeah,
And
'cause it's like
sports
you're
are
pushing.
games. Usually you use your body. Chess, you don't. And that's why some people say chess is not a sport, although I disagree. But essentially if we exclude chess, it's usually a game where you use your sport. I mean your sport, your body.
I actually think sports uses more areas of the brain than chess does. So like, yeah, chess, you're using like a very specific logical analytical part of your brain, and you're kind of shutting off a lot of other parts. Whereas I feel like sports, you are still strategizing a lot, right? If you're like playing football, you have to decide, do I want to run, do I want to pass, like what kind of play, do I want to do a screen play, how many people do I want at the offensive line? So like football, I feel like uses more parts of the brain than chess does, and you could argue it's actually really a more satisfying experience, like winning a game than with chess. So yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I
mean,
know with tennis, there's a psychological game too. It's not just a physical game. I mean, you have to have a certain amount of physical dexterity to play to your own satisfaction. But you and your opponent are engaged in a mental battle as well. It's like a boxing match, 80 feet apart.
Mhm.
And but if I can just step back for a moment with my newspaper column inch thing. My wife is a science teacher, and here in our area we have something called the Science Olympiad, where schools compete to answer science questions. And she took a team to the state finals, and the local paper didn't publish anything at all.
Yeah, I felt
And
exactly.
she sent them information about how well the kids did, and the paper didn't publish it.
That
But
sucks.
they publish everything about baseball, basketball, football, you know. And so there was a double standard there. It's not just that sports are more fun. If part of the reason you're doing it is to teach the kids that are involved in it something, what are you teaching them if you don't even publish the state champions?
Yeah, David, I felt that 100%. So I hate to brag a little bit here, but I went to a high school that there weren't very many people into math other than me. So there were a lot of other high schools that had like really dedicated math teams. They all had. But my high school, I was like probably the only one that was like really into competitions and stuff. And there were like a lot of times like I won these awards like top in the state at this competition or the other competition. It not only did they not mention it at my school, yeah, my teacher, like I told my teacher like didn't even really care. My teacher was like, "Oh, good job" or something. Like it was, but if we won a sports thing, everyone at the school would be talking about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, what a lot of these
It's out of proportion. It's totally out of proportion.
Yeah, so I won these state level math competitions, and like even my teacher like just didn't care at all. So yeah, um, but
And you are involved in math as an adult.
yeah,
How many high school basketball players your age are still playing basketball?
well, a lot.
A tiny fraction.
Action as a career, but a lot do it for
Yeah.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm really doing math for. I don't know if you could really say like my math helps me a little in my job. I don't know if I need it at that level to be able to do my job. But yeah, no, I know I don't need it at that level to do my job. But yeah, maybe it's just a little.
Well, I was spouting off some statistics of Tesla's new motor that they're working on that is absolutely incredible. It will go 0 to 60 in 2 seconds.
The Roadster, right?
Well, no, I think it's the Model S Plaid, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
But the thing is my sister-in-law said, I don't want to go 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. And,
Yeah.
and my thing is that I don't either, but I'm very glad that exists because it creates competition in that arena and gives people something to strive for.
Yeah, that reminds me. I saw a YouTube video where Elon Musk was teaching Jay Leno about his cars, and Elon Musk was telling Jay Leno that the glass on the windows was bulletproof. And then Jay Leno said, "Why the heck would anyone need bulletproof glass?" And then Elon Musk said, "You wouldn't want bulletproof glass? Isn't that awesome? Just bulletproof glass, right? That's the coolest thing ever, right?" And then Jay Leno's like, "Whatever."
Yeah.
But but let's go back to that question. You know, like if I think because you're kind of like raising an interesting question, which is the fact that if sports are kind of like overvalued, you know, overrated in society, if maybe we're getting priorities a little bit wrong here, and
I don't know if overrated and out of proportion mean the same thing. They don't to me.
Can
In
you
other words,
elaborate on that?
well, it's not so much that sports are overrated, but the attention to sports is out of proportion to the purpose of a school.
Yeah, but in other words, it's not that sports is still great, but our focus is in maybe as balanced as it could be. Yeah.
so we're talking. So yeah, I guess I was maybe I was asking a question that was a little bit broader, but we can
Yeah.
start by talking about the sports in schools and specifically, and that's a very American phenomenon. You know, that's something that, for example, I didn't grow up with, and I don't really think it exists in a different country. I think that's
It does.
what other country?
Well, soccer in Europe is huge, even at the
No,
high school level.
no, it's not. I mean, I
It's
grew
not.
no, I grew
I
up.
thought it was.
No, it's not at all. That's what I'm saying. For me, like you like it's hard. I wouldn't even understand. So just so you have an idea, I wouldn't even understand what you're talking about if it weren't for TV and movies. Well, and
Really?
I did teach in schools here for a while, so but I still didn't really I wasn't really involved with that stuff. So I still wouldn't understand it. I really understand because of movies and TV. No, because you don't have you do, yeah, it's not the same. You don't have like people can do sports, but it's not seen as something that really interests
So,
anyone other than the people that
so
are participating
all of the fascination with soccer happens after
outside
school.
outside of school. Yeah,
Wow, I
yeah,
didn't know that. I
yeah. It's
stand corrected.
well, I mean, it's okay. I mean, it's natural for you to assume that. I
Yeah,
absolutely understand it. It makes sense. But that's kind of like what I'm pointing out, that it's that particular
pretty
phenomenon.
arrogant of me.
No, I don't think it's arrogant. I think it's normal. You know, like you grew up within a certain situation, and you know, you would assume that something else is somewhat similar. And I now that you're saying that, I can see why you would think that. But it's actually not. It's different. Like sports, it's like you know, like in schools here in the United States, kids will do like plays, you know. That doesn't mean necessarily that, you know, it's that those school plays are not the same as Hollywood, right? You know what I mean? It's not a perfect analogy, but it's, you know, Hollywood is something distant. Same thing, for example, in Europe or South America, you know, you have sports in school that, you know, you play with your friends or you even play for the school or whatever, but then you have sports as, you know, the people that are famous, you know, and that you'll watch and you'll talk about it with friends, you know, but it's like two completely different worlds. I don't know if I'm making sense, but
So
there's
I think you're saying it's not really like competitive soccer in schools.
yeah, I mean, in a sense, yeah, it's not that competitive. It's only competitive for the people that are playing, essentially. But like, you know, you don't have like crazy parents getting involved and, you know, like high school football teams, you know, selling a bunch of tickets and teachers and parents and the community going to games and, you know,
What
writing
about
about it. No, nobody cares. You know, what people will care about and talk about is, you know, the professional league.
Manchester United?
Manchester United or, you know, professional clubs.
Yeah, I guess so. So yeah, going back, so Bruno, you were talking about like, I guess I don't like looking, I don't like looking down upon something or thinking that like we overdo it before we really understand why people do it to begin with. So it's like we mentioned a couple different reasons. Like we were saying, there's probably a bunch of different reasons why people like sports, right? We were saying we don't think it's really just any one reason, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, yeah, we went through some of those. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why people like sports.
Yeah. Um,
And like I was saying before, it's like people like games in general, you know, like people like games.
I
Yeah.
enjoy games.
Like, you know, when people get together, you know, a lot of the times they'll play a game, you know, like if you have people, you know, at night, say at night in the same house, what are you going to do? Right. I mean, one option, you talk, maybe you drink. Another option, maybe, you know,
You
these days,
talk and drink.
yeah, I mean, that's even better. These days, I mean, we have television, so I guess people could get together and watch a movie, right? That's another very popular option.
Well, the thing is,
Before, not even that, you couldn't do that because there was no television and there was no cinema at home.
Is
So
it-
really, the options were either you talk and you drink, or basically you play a game, or you know, people are not just gonna look at each other, you know, without doing anything.
I play games, but I don't watch games.
yeah, same with
You know, I participate in the sport, but I don't watch sports. I mean, you know, I watch a little bit of Wimbledon and I watch the Super Bowl, but it's not like every Sunday I'm glued to the set, you know, in the fall. Yeah.
I think there's like a like I think we also are missing a big part of it. There's like a heavy psychological element in sports, right? Like especially like, for example, like during the Super Bowl, you know, these aren't people just, you know, throwing a ball back and forth. These are people who are like even if the viewer isn't emotionally invested in the game, you can't deny that the players are very emotionally invested in the outcome, right? So at least for the players, it's a very emotional experience, right?
Yeah, I've seen like in the Olympics, like someone, I remember seeing a gymnast cry after her floor routine because she thought she didn't do well enough.
Oh yeah, there's nothing sadder than like this like 15-year-old girl that spent her whole life trying to get to the Olympics, and then finally she makes it, and like in the gymnastics she like falls or whatever, and now all her dreams are crushed. Like that's just so sad to watch. But there's just so much emotion in an event like that. Now, should there be? That's questionable, but the fact is there is a lot of emotion for the people doing these things. They really want to win, and they've really like given it their all. So yeah.
Well, you know, you're kind of like raising a question that is something that is on my mind as well, which is, but this is another subtopic. But I think you're raising that issue, which is like the relationship between sports and meaning, you know, and I could also say games and meaning, which would be probably, you know, but let's go with sports. So the interesting thing about sports is that life is very complicated, but sports are not. You know, in life you can go anywhere. I mean, it's kind of like an all over the place thing, you know, but games will actually give you the instructions to how to play the game. You know, life, you know, nobody really explains to you because nobody really knows, you know, what you're supposed to do. That's the reality. So life is very kind of like stressful for a lot of people, you know, but in a game, you know exactly what you have to do. The only question is, can you do it well enough? Can you actually do it better than the other person you're going to compete against? I mean, those are, you know, the questions, if you're going to win or not.
Well,
You know what you have to do. Everybody knows, like if you're playing a game, unless you're learning the game in the beginning, but by the time you learn the rules, you know exactly, you know pretty much as well as the best player in the world, you know what the game is about, you know what you need to do to win the game, and then it's just a matter of figuring out how to do things in a way that, you know, you win it, but you understand the rules, you understand the structure, right? Unlike life. So you simplify things in a way that is very satisfying for people, you know. I feel that way when I play any game. It's so simple and it's so great.
You're hitting on something that I've encountered playing tennis, the hard part is not knowing what to do. The hard part is doing what I know. And I still struggle with it. I always struggle with that. Everybody struggles with that, you know. That's part of the game.
Yeah, exactly. So that's simplicity. And another thing is that I was gonna say, perhaps because there is a simplicity to games, a game doesn't really mean anything. That's another thing in which is like similar to life, right? The game itself doesn't mean anything. But then you go to the Olympics, and that's kind of like those people, if someone's in the Olympics these days, because it's very competitive, if someone, let's say tennis, right? If someone is in the Olympics playing tennis, that person isn't just like perhaps David. I mean, I'm assuming a little bit, but I think you probably just play once a week or 2 times a week or so, you know, and it's not like the meaning of your life. You'll play 5 times. Also, you play even more than I thought, but I mean, you have other objectives in life, and you know, so these professional tennis players, they can't really do much else in life, because if not, they can't be professionals, right? So the way tennis started, you know, it was just a game. It's just a way to pass the time. It's just a way to like exercise. But then someone that dedicates his or her life to tennis, they're attributing a lot of meaning to this game, you know, and it becomes something almost metaphysical. And that's another thing about sports that is interesting, and something that people are drawn to, is that they attribute a lot of meaning to something that by itself doesn't have any meaning. Like if you win a soccer match, it doesn't really, you know, mean much. But if you attribute like a lot of importance to it, you know, when Brazil lost in 1950, Brazil played its first final of a World Cup, 1950. There were 250,000 people in the stands. Brazil played at home in the Maracanã in Rio. 250,000 people went to the stadium to watch Brazil play Uruguay. And it was going to be the first time that Brazil would become like the world champions. Brazil lost. They didn't become world champions. Uruguay became world champions. And there were tens of people that committed suicide that same day because Brazil lost. Brazil lost a soccer game that they were watching, perhaps not even in the stands. Like imagine well, it's crazy, but it's complete truth.
True.
You can look it up.
Reality.
Yeah, that's reality. Absolutely. I'm not making it up. You can look it up on the internet. Imagine the kind of
and everything's true on the internet.
Well, yeah, look it up in a newspaper. I don't know.
I believe it.
But look, I mean, they are attributing meaning to something that in itself doesn't have any meaning, right? So that's like something that is interesting about sports, is like the kinds of meaning that people put into these things.
I think I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, I would be curious for you to say to Rafa Nadal that the French Open doesn't mean anything, or to Roger Federer.
It's not that it doesn't mean anything. It's that it doesn't really mean anything by itself. You know, they attribute the meaning, and the fans attribute the meaning, right? And you can make a lot of parallels with life, you know, like, but it's, I mean, is chess super important? Probably not. You know, people used to play chess, and you know, they would play chess because it's a good exercise, just like I play chess today, actually. You know, like it's a good exercise. You have some fun, you get together with some friends, you know, hopefully become a little bit more agile with your mind. Back in the Middle Ages, when they had the sport or the game, you know, it was actually useful for aristocrats, who are actually usually the people that play the game, you know, because a lot of them would go on to sometimes lead whole armies, or more often probably small.
I don't believe it really helps leading an army, but
no, but they believe that, though. They believe that. Yeah, I mean, it was a widely held belief that, you know, it would help you with military thinking. That's one of the reasons why, you know, they played it. But that was it. Now and that was probably the most, you know, the most consequential thing. But for the most part, it was just like a game, right? Nowadays, you know, compare that to Bobby Fischer. For Bobby Fischer, chess was life.
Yeah.
That was the meaning of his life.
Well, then he started to hate it at the end of his life.
I know, because maybe
But at
because he
that point,
figured out that you can't give that much importance to a game. But look at how that's what's kind of like I'm pointing out is that the game itself, chess, is not like I guess it's not
inherently
supposed
meaningful. Yeah.
to give sense to your life, right? But
Yeah.
if you attribute that meaning to it, then it does.
I think there's one key difference with sports that I just thought of as you were speaking. So both sports and chess are very psychological battles, right? And people like watching that. People like a real emotional, like draining psychological battle. It's something about that is fun to watch, is exciting to watch, right? The difference is, so with sports, you're really seeing the psychological battle in action. Like, you've got the defensive line, right? They're all trying to get the quarterback and they're trying to tackle him. You got the offensive line trying to, blockade the quarterback. You got the quarterback trying to scramble out of the pocket, like you really see that psychological action in real time. You know what I mean? It's very visual. Whereas chess is also a very psychological game, but you can't really see, and I might question this, but the way most people think about it, with chess, you just see two people looking at a board, right? In their brain, there's all this, fear, anxiety, excitement in their brain, but what you see visually is just two people staring at a board, right? So it's very different in that respect. Sometimes you can see, like, when one player makes a move that the other doesn't expect, they might, like, their eyebrows might go up. You're like, oh, I know they didn't expect that. Or like, I find that fascinating. Like, you see some of it in the Queen's Gambit. I don't know if, David, you watched the TV show The Queen's Gambit.
Yeah.
But like when a player makes a move the other doesn't expect, you can see it on their face. And that's like I find that pretty fascinating. But not the same as sports where it's like really vivid. You can see that battle. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, if when I play tennis, I don't know about other people, but when I play tennis,
Yeah.
if my opponent does something that upsets me, I try not to let it show on my face.
Yeah, you try to hide it.
Yeah. And that's part of the game.
Mm-hmm.
A poker face is just as valuable playing tennis as it is playing cards.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's a very mental game, tennis.
Oh yeah.
Very mental game.
Yeah, I think a lot of sports, a lot of the meaning people attribute to sports is in that psychological battle. Or like, especially like if you have like an intense rivalry, especially when the teams like really don't like each other. Because like I went to UNC Chapel Hill and there was a big rivalry against Duke. And a lot of times rivalries you think are just, silly, friendly rivalries. But there were a lot of people at my school that really didn't like Duke. They thought Duke was snobby, that the kids were rich and stuck up, and they just really didn't like Duke. And so, like, when you have like a real rival,
I'm rich and stuck up, and I didn't go to Duke.
yeah. I personally couldn't care less. My roommates would hate me if I said this, but I was not super invested in the rivalry. But some people really were, and so that kind of psychological battle, I think, is what people really like about it, and how you can see it in action. Like it's not just like chess where you can't really see it. You can vividly see the battle. So, yeah.
Well, I think part of that is it shows us, it teaches us a lot. Like that kind of a situation teaches us a lot about people and about politics, communities. Because why do they hate Duke? They probably don't really hate Duke.
Yeah.
Hating Duke is a function of they need to find a common enemy so they can belong to the same community. like it doesn't really mean much to be part of a community if there's no opponent, if there's no enemy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we often need a common enemy in order to be a community. That's why nationalism usually comes from wars. You know, there was no really such thing as France before the 100 Years' War, you know. But when the English are, you know, trying to take over for, I think it was more than 100 years, even though it's called 100 Years' War, you develop a sense of community, right? That's, you know,
Yeah.
and then you create a country out of that. Same thing for your football game, you know, like why do people hate Duke? Probably because they need a common enemy so they can all feel part of the same community and bond. And I think, you know, that's exactly the same process as, like I said, you know, it can be the 100 Years' War, or it can be, you know, any modern war. It doesn't need to be medieval war. In fact, you know, like, well, there are plenty of examples, World War II and so on and so forth, you know, but that's the process. That's the tribalist process.
Yeah.
Find a common enemy that is not you, and you find your commonalities with other people, and you figure out you're part of the same community, and you bond over how much you hate the other ones.
Okay, question.
Mm-hmm.
If someone wins a game, a tough rivalry type game, you know, whether it's a team or individuals or chess or baseball, it doesn't matter. If they win the game, in so doing, they exhibit advanced physical prowess that's more advanced than the other. And in the case of chess, is mental prowess. But do people confuse that success with thinking the person is a better person? And how does that differ from the concept of might makes right?
Well, I don't know about the second one. The first one, absolutely. And in fact, I just watched the trailer for a documentary for Naomi Osaka, who you probably know her, David, because
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Well, she's one of the, say, like top 3 tennis players in the world for women, female tennis players. She's actually
a Brit.
She's American. Well, she plays for, it's complicated. She plays for Japan. Okay. She was born in Japan. Her dad is from Haiti. They ended up moving to the United States. I think she was 2 or 3. So she grew up in the United States. And then her parents decided that she was going to play for Japan. So it's kind of you know, whatever that makes her. But I think she's probably the most famous female athlete in the world, or certainly the most famous female tennis player in the world. She's a big star. I mean, she's like in the Forbes list. I mean, she makes a huge.
What was her name?
Naomi Osaka, I think. But yeah, and there's a documentary. Yeah, there's a documentary that is going to come out on Netflix. I was watching the trailer, and that's exactly what she says. It's in the trailer itself. Is you know, everybody knows me as a tennis player. Everybody has always known me, you know, as far as I can remember, as a tennis player. What am I if I'm not a good tennis player? You know, I don't know. I don't know what that makes me. And you know, fortunately for her, she is a very good tennis player, but also it seems to still affect her, you know, because sometimes she doesn't win, obviously, right? And she takes that as, I guess, from what I've gathered, you know, as a defeat of her own person, you know, like if she doesn't win something, she's not good, you know. Not as a tennis player, but she's not good as a person. And that, I think that's something that you see even in elite athletes like her, you know, one of the best in the world. Also, Tiger Woods. I don't know if you guys watched it, but there's a very good kind of like recent documentary as well on HBO about Tiger Woods. and you kind of like see the same pattern, like he's only a golf guy, like he's golf player. That's what he is. And if he doesn't win, like it's like he's defeated as a human as well, so there's a real danger in anything in life, but certainly sports. That's the thing about sports shows you things about life in a very simple way. Like you see that when you associate the person with the activity, like in that case, playing golf or playing tennis, and that thing doesn't go well, then the psychology of it is like devastating, because then you are no good as a person.
But I don't think when people watch sports and like see someone win or lose, I don't think they're thinking about morality. I think it's a very like amoral activity. They want to see people push themselves to their limit, because there's this sort of endorphin rush or high we get after we push ourselves to the limit. Like when you play a good basketball game and you push yourself to the limit, whether you win or lose, I feel like there's still like just an endorphin rush that we get when we feel like we gave it our all. And I feel like that's what people are looking at when they watch sports, not morality, really.
Well, I was talking about the psychology of the people that are playing the sport, like in this case.
Yeah, maybe they feel bad. Maybe they feel like they let their fans down or something, which I think is a kind of silly sentiment. But
well, it's if they believe, as they do, and they have admitted to feeling that way, that they are the tennis player, that they are the golf player, what they're saying is they're admitting to the fact that if they don't win a golf tournament, if they don't win a tennis tournament, they feel defeated, not just in the sport, not just in the game, but as a person, because they failed to do what they're meant to do, which is to win, as a golf player, as a tennis player, right? So but I mean, you could apply, I feel that you could apply the same thing to life, to a lot of things in life. If someone identifies himself with being, you are valuable because, for example, you are rich. The moment you stop being rich, you stop being valuable. That's one example. There are many.
Yeah, I don't think it's meant, like, I don't think they feel they're a worse person in like a good versus bad way. But yeah, I see what you're saying. Like, your identity can really get tied into that.
I don't think it's so much morality that they feel. I think it's just less confident in themselves and their abilities. It's kind of like, they don't feel like they're immoral in like a good versus evil sense. They feel less confident in them. They feel like, just less confident in their abilities, which I feel like is a little different. But yeah.
Well, it raises some existential questions.
Yeah.
When I play, I play opponents, obviously, but in my mind, I'm always playing myself. I'm playing to try to improve how I perform, regardless of the opponent. And
you keep score?
I don't know about other people, but that's what I do. We keep score. Yeah.
I feel like that changes things a lot. Like if you play tennis and you're just trying to beat the other person, but you're not tracking each point, then that's different from when you're like,
Well, that is a major difference between tennis and any kind of team sport. There's no getting ahead and running out the clock. Okay.
Yeah.
You have to win every single point. And you're not going to win unless you win more points than the other person, no matter what. You can be 1 point away from winning and still lose, and I've seen that happen many times.
Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting, Bruno, talking about the existential questions, like when your identity is so wrapped up in what you're doing. And obviously that's not just sports, like you said, that's like everything in life. But like when you identify like so closely with your profession and then you're not successful at it, like how that impacts you psychologically. Yeah, so I guess it's probably not good to have so much of your identity tied up with your profession. But I feel like at the same time, that's kind of what makes it exciting. Like let's say you're watching the Super Bowl and the players are like, I really want to win this game, but even if I lose, it's not the end of the world. Like part of the reason why people like watching it is because it seems like that is the only thing that matters to those players. Like they gotta win this, you know, it's do or die, right?
Well, hey, at that level, even if I lose, I get $1 million.
Yeah.
You know?
But obviously they're not thinking that way. Like
They're not thinking that way because they already have the $1 million in that case, you know,
Yeah.
and it's like what I was saying, you know, it's the meaning that they attribute to it, you know, like for example, there's the example of Lionel Messi, which you guys don't follow soccer, but Lionel Messi is the greatest player in the world, one of the greatest of all time. And the problem with Lionel Messi is that he has never won anything with Argentina, except for the Olympic Games, which in soccer is not considered a big thing. So essentially, he's never won anything with Argentina. And people keep throwing this at his face, you know, and this guy's like the best, you know, the best in the world. He's been the best in the world for 10 years. People keep throwing this at, you know, in his face, you know, like, yeah, haven't won anything with Argentina, you know. You've won all these things with Barcelona, which is his club, but he's never won a big tournament with his country. And I mean, Lionel Messi makes $100 million a year. You know, he couldn't care less about money at this point. You know, he could could burn, you know, millions of dollars, you know, just for the fun of it, like Joker in, you know, The Dark Knight. It wouldn't really even affect his bank account at this point. But, you know, you see when he plays for Argentina, you know, it's not even like when he plays for Barcelona, you know, like you can see that this guy is tortured by the notion that he has never won anything for Argentina. And he's reached 4 finals. He's lost all of them. What, like, I'm sure he'll live. I'm sure he'll have a good life and all that. But if he can't win anything with Argentina, and he's now like 34, like it's getting, you know, it's getting to the end. Like it means something.
That's so encouraging, Bruno.
Well, no, I mean it's the reality of it. I mean, the thing is, tomorrow he has the final of the Copa America, which is the South American South American / Pan American Championship, and Argentina plays Brazil in the final. So it's a big game. But the big question is this, you know, is Lionel Messi going to be able to win his 5th final? Is he going to be able to win the first time something with Argentina or not? And if he doesn't, this is probably going to chase him till he dies, you know, because people are going to keep saying, well, he never really won anything with Argentina.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't really play sports without being somewhat emotionally invested. It's very hard to play a game that intensely and say, I'm doing this crazy athletic feat, but if it doesn't work out, whatever. Like you can't do that psychologically, right?
So it's, and also like something like soccer, you know, like I think there's something about that it shows is about meaning as well, is that meaning comes from the collective of people, not just like the meaning you attribute to something, but the meaning that the collective attributes to something. Like nobody really cares if someone wins a volleyball game, even in the Olympics, you know, like the people that are playing, yes, they care, obviously, you know, it might even define them, like we're saying about, but you know, not, you know, the country is not gonna really be talking about it all that much, right? Unless it's a volleyball crazy country. I don't know if there are any countries like that. I don't think so. But look, in 1994, the goalkeeper of Colombia, I think it was the goalkeeper, or maybe it was the center back. I think it was the goalkeeper. He made a terrible mistake. Colombia lost a game of football. I think it might have been against England or some other team. Essentially, they got kicked out of the tournament, 1994 World Cup. A couple of days later, he's assassinated. He got killed. You know, as soon as he goes back to Colombia, they kill him on the street like a dog. You know, that's how much the community cares. You know, it's not just anything, you know, it's like there is a real pressure of the community. Or Messi, you know, like when he goes back to Argentina, like the community is upset with him. And in fact, you know, they're very mean to him in Argentina because they're upset that he's never won anything, that the country has never won anything. And they feel that the thing with Argentina is that soccer is very important for their identity. And Messi has the bad luck of basically the last time Argentina had the best player in the world, they won the World Cup and he was the big star in the World Cup. And that is like Argentina's biggest moment. And now they want that again. And you know, so there is a real pressure of the community in sports. Just like, you know, like in high school football, it's a different level, but you know, it's different. Like I was saying, you know, or you know, like if you play a soccer game in Europe and in high school, nobody cares, you know, probably not even your parents. But if you play a high school football game and it's the final of the state championship in Texas, the community does care, you know, so that has a different kind of like effect on the players, that has a different kind of effect on everybody.
Yeah, maybe I almost feel like you need to be somewhat invested if you're going to play at that high of a level. But yeah, maybe we should be asking the question as a society, like, should we be that invested in those kind of things? Like, probably, I would say probably not, right? But yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like, when I watch, like, sometimes I'll actually watch a chess game live. Like, I'll watch. Like they'll have it up on the internet. They'll say this grandmaster made this move, the opponent made this move, and they'll show it, and I'll watch it, you know, as it's going. And I don't like it when either player messes up. I want to see like what the best moves are. But if either player makes a move or they just outright lose a piece or it was just a bad move, which doesn't happen super often at a really high level. But when it does happen, I don't like to see that. I want to see them both play their best. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas like sports is like a different thing. It's like you just want to crush the opposition. Yeah. Or you just want to see yours like, so yeah, I don't know.
Be right back.
You know, we didn't talk about the whole thing about the female athletes getting paid as much money as the male athletes. Let's maybe we can tackle that. I just watched that documentary. Maybe, you know, I recommend it. I mean, it's interesting. Carolyn, you have barely spoken, and you're female, so maybe this is
Oh boy. You know,
this is a good opportunity for you to get into the conversation. I mean, what do you think about that? Like, have you watched that documentary about the national women's team in soccer in the US?
No, and before you posted the discussion questions in the chat this morning, I didn't even know there was a discrepancy.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually,
yeah. I mean, yeah, male athletes get paid way more, at least in certain sport. Like, yeah, in basketball, it's not even close. But yeah, I think there's so.
Well, let me just say what the issue is about, like in the documentary. But we can also have the general conversation, right? Should females and males be getting about the same? And basically, the documentary is about these women in the U.S. men's national soccer team. It's a long name. No, U.S. women's national soccer team, and basically they're saying, you know, they do the same job as the males, which is play for the U.S. national soccer team, but they're getting paid less for what they do, right?
And by the same organization, I think this is
by the same organization. So they're saying, well, this is the situation. We do the same job, we get paid less for doing the same job, and they're portraying this as, this is a symbol of what goes on in society in the United States and really across the world, that women get paid less for doing the same job as men. I mean, this is their argument, but this is, and it gets complicated. Actually, the actual reality of it gets a little bit complicated. But there's no point. You guys haven't even seen that particular document, so there's no point about talking about the intricacies. But perhaps we can talk a little bit about the notion of, should female athletes get paid about as much as the males?
I mean, I can't think of a reason why not.
I guess, I mean, from a market,
At least on a percentage basis of the total take, from the fans. And I don't even think women get that, but they should.
I guess the question is, should your, because there's a question of, I think I've read something similar in the past, and so the men are going to bring in, or probably, this is just my assumption, but the men are probably going to bring in a lot more revenue for the team, for the league, than the women, right? Just because more people watch men's. So it's kind of a question of, so I think there's one question: should we as a society watch men's sports and women's sports equally? But are we being unfair to women because we only watch them, because so many more people watch the men's sports? And then the second question is, if it's okay that we watch men's sports more than women's sports, then should that translate to men getting a higher salary because they bring in more revenue? Because from a business perspective, if one person brings in a lot more revenue than another person, you would expect their salary would be higher in a perfectly free market world. So do we want that, or do we want not the free market, but do we want some rule in place to make it more equal? So I think that's kind of my questions. But yeah.
I think you put it very well, Michael. I think those are really true, very pertinent questions. Maybe we can start, just for the sake of simplicity and being clear. The first one, what, I guess, how did you put it? How should
we be watching? Are we unfair to women because we watch men's sports so much more than we watch women's sports?
Well, I think it's an endeavor of persuasion, not of legislation. In other words, we shouldn't make a rule that you have to watch just as much women's sports as you do men's sport. We should persuade people at large that.
So then that's the question. But do you think that we as a society should watch the two equally?
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean,
but I imagine a lot of people disagree with me.
Well, I kind of disagree with you, not dramatically, but I do think that, ultimately people should watch whatever they want, right? I mean, that's kind of like my base thought, my base belief there. So really, in from my point of view, really the question is, why are the women not really watching women's sports? And that is kind of like my question there, because I think it's kind of like normal for the men to watch male sports more, and that is in fact what happens.
Yeah, I guess, we could just start with the fact, I mean, more men watch sports than women, so we're okay with that. I'm guessing, I'm making assumptions here, but I mean, in general, more men watch sports than women. I don't know if that's just biological or cultural, or whether that's good or bad, but I guess that's a fact. More men watch sports than women, right?
Yeah, I think that it's fair to say that that's a fact. Yeah.
And then if that's true, should men watch both men's and women's the same, or should men be, should we be okay if men watch men's sports more? So yeah.
Well, there's a moral question there, right? And then there's another question, which is another different dimension of the question, is more sociological, I guess. The moral question, I don't think we should force anybody to necessarily what, I don't think we should be in the business of forcing men,
Forcing it, yeah.
to watch, female sports, like what is the
Yeah, not a
rationale
question
behind
of
it, right?
not a question of like forcing or but do you think they should? Like kind of like what David said, like a matter of legislation versus persuasion. Like, do you think men should watch both equally, or if men like watching men more, do you think that's just okay?
Well,
Yeah.
let me put the example that let me present the example of the soccer teams, right? Really, the men, so male football, male soccer really has a tradition that female soccer doesn't, for one reason or another. But that's really what men have been watching for 100+ years or 200 years, and that's why the sport is so big. It's not big because it started yesterday or 10 years ago. I mean, it's been going on at least since professionally, at least since the end of the 19th century or whatever. It's a long time. And so that's male soccer, male football, that people have been watching. So for you to tell all those fans, like for example myself, but everybody, that they're so invested and they know and they've been watching all their lives these male soccer players, and for you to tell people, well, you should really watch the women play just as much as the men. You know what I mean? It's a little bit awkward, because you're not invested.
I don't think that's very persuasive.
Well, it's not very persuasive, right? I mean, because it's not your thing. It's not really what you watch. It's not really what it's not really what you grew up with. It's essentially it's pretty much a different sport. I mean, that's what it is.
All right, just for clarity, help me understand, because I don't watch sports, so naturally I don't understand. But help me understand how what you are driving at is different from the statement, well, that's the way we've always done it.
Well, I'm trying to figure this out, right? But I'm trying to kind of like point out to the fact that it's difficult. I think ultimately it's a matter of tradition and history, and the fact that if women's sports are to have the same impact, ultimately women have to watch these sports, right?
Why? Maybe men could watch women's sports.
No, I mean, to some extent, yes, but they're not going to give it the same importance, that they're not going to spend as much time, as much energy. They're not going to be as invested, just because it's not what they're, it's not what they do.
Why not? Why not? Is it just because they identify with men more? Yeah,
it could be, but it's also the fact, the tradition behind it. It's the history, like you were saying before. You grew up watching something. Like, why do people care about, say, the Lakers and not some, like I'm not a big basketball fan, so but let's say a second-rate basketball team, maybe not even in the NBA, in the lower league. Why are the Lakers more important? Right? Because
that's not just tradition. That's not just a tradition. That's because
part of it is
actually much.
Like the New York Yankees don't have the same following as a minor league team in Nebraska,
But they're way better. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also a matter of the tradition of the club.
Yeah.
How many generations grew up watching the New York Yankees? That's what, like, big teams, big sports teams, just like big sports. I mean, they're not, you don't build them in 1 week, right, or 1 year. These are
But
usually
maybe you
things
should.
that-
But you could move more in that. I guess I feel like you have to be careful when using the tradition argument, because if the tradition is something that's unfair, then the tradition should be like, it might not be changed overnight, but if you have a tradition that's been unfair historically, then you should work at changing the tradition. It won't happen right away, but you should work at it, right?
Yes, I mean, it's a complicated question. I think ultimately it's a complicated question. I would say maybe you can try to promote both things kind of like in the same way and give people the choice, but ultimately, you're not going to be able to force people to watch something they don't want to watch.
Yeah.
That's
I
not
guess,
really how
but
how
so
society
yeah,
can work, really.
it won't change on it. But like, I guess you could imagine hypothetically, like, you could imagine in your mind, let's say, a world where in 30 years they're much more equal, right? So right now they're clearly not at all equal, right? And people clearly have a preference. But you could imagine 30, it's possible to conceive that in like 30, 40 years they could be closer, right? But then the question is, do we want to make more of a push in that direction? Yeah, I guess it's like, whenever there's a tradition,
Well, people watch more women's sports than they did 30 years ago.
yeah. People watch more women's sports today than they did 30 years ago, right? So I guess the question is, should there be more of a push in that direction? Even if it's not going to be equal in in like the near future, but yeah.
Let's advance the second question, because we're like it's almost
Okay.
time. So maybe the second question is perhaps even like more relevant, which is, if men bring in more money, shouldn't they get more money, right?
Yeah.
Which is essentially, that's what you asked, right?
Yeah.
And that's the biggest argument against the women's equal pay claim. In fact, just curiously, the first defense that the U.S. Soccer Federation chose was not that one, was actually a terrible defense, which actually got the president fired, that women are inherently inferior to men as athletes, so men should naturally get more money, which really didn't go down well in the 21st century. But that's a terrible way to go about it. Anyways, that's just curious.
Well,
That's what they went with.
Could argue, I don't like that argument, but I mean, you could argue there's something to watching the best possible people at that sport athletically, right? So like the fact that on the average, men are more skilled at sports. There's like, when you're watching the men's, you're watching the world's at best human beings. But I don't know if that's really a good, like, I still don't really like that, because I don't think women's can just be as I don't really. So me, Michael Greenberg, I don't care as much personally about watching the absolute best in the world as I do watching an entertaining game. So I would be just as entertained watching women play as men play. But some people think it's important. They want to see the absolute best human beings. So I'm sorry, David, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, if you were to watch a guy 6'7" beat a person that's 5'2" at basketball, is that really an accomplishment?
No.
It's not.
Yeah, I think that argument, Michael, I don't think that's a strong argument. I mean, I understand. I think that you've been skillful in the way you presented it, like that's a better version, that's a better way of presenting it than the US Soccer Federation, for example. I still don't think that's a very strong argument, though. I mean, it's like what David said, or I would say people that watch like martial arts, for example, that's like a pretty weak argument, because like I'm not gonna say, well, I just want to watch heavyweights and not lightweights because they're bigger and stronger, like it doesn't, and saying like, well, heavyweights deserve to get paid more. I don't know. That's a pretty weak argument.
But I think I might know why. So I think the revenue argument is the real argument. I think the league might have.
I would agree. I think that's a much stronger argument. Yeah.
Well,
I think the league might have.
and it's my understanding, and I could be wrong because I haven't looked it up, I haven't studied, but I did hear at one point that the women's soccer team is not just not paid the same as men. They're not paid the same percentage of the take as men. And
Of the revenue, you mean?
yeah, that concerns me. I don't think that's right.
Yeah, I don't. So if that's true, I think that is not right. I've heard people say the reverse, that as like as a percentage of the revenue brought in, women make more. But I don't know if what you're saying is true, then I think that's not right. That probably is unfair. Yeah.
I know it was true in professional tennis at one point.
In tennis.
Yeah. I don't know if it's true now, but I don't think so.
Let's say, like, Carolyn, what do you think? If men bring in more money, would that be a justification for women not to have access to equal pay? Should it always be proportional to the amount of money they essentially bring in?
I mean, yeah, I guess I suppose that would make sense since that's how it works in other aspects of the market.
But I think the soccer league probably didn't choose that reason because they didn't want to look like money hungry people. If they, I think they chose,
which they are.
Which they are, yeah. But I mean, I think it's so yeah, it's a question. It's kind of a question of free market versus. I don't know if there should be some measure of equalization, even if it's not 100%. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's a very subjective question. Like one, yeah, these athletes bring in a lot more revenue than these, but should the pay still be more equal? I don't know. That's a question of values. I feel like I would probably be in favor. I, as Michael Greenberg, would be in favor of some measure of equalization, but there's not an obvious justification, in my opinion.
Yeah. Someone talking. Well, I think that you got to take that into account to a certain extent, right? The amount of money that they're bringing in. But yeah, you also have to try not to discriminate against people just because of their gender, and there really should be a balance there.
Yeah.
But I mean in particular this case, I mean, it's kind of complicated because it has lots of intricacies, and I feel that we would need to kind of like look into those intricacies to come up with like an accurate assessment. So that's why I'm trying to do it more about the general idea. I mean, in the outcome was that the lawsuit, I believe, was dismissed for the most part. The equal pay, they were told, yeah, that shouldn't be the case by the judge.
So that did it not even go to court? Like, was it dismissed by the judge, or it went to court and then?
Yeah, no, I think it was dismissed by the judge. It didn't even reach the jury.
Interesting. Yeah. Then these questions are so hard. Like, it's hard to have an argument that doesn't rest on some kind of subjective value system for these questions, because you can generalize the argument to just when should we stick with the free market and when should we have equalization measure or some measure of equalization, and that can apply to anything really. So I think when there's like clear discrimination, like I think just from a Michael Reamer perspective, I think there should be like some legislation against discrimination in pay. Like if a worker of one race is making less than another, and often that's like really, really hard to prove that race is the reason why. But if you have really clear justification, which is really rare and really hard to get, and that's unfortunate because probably there is more discrimination than there is than it's easy to find evidence for. But if you really can find evidence for it, then I think it's good that such a law exists to prevent that discrimination.
And I understand what you're saying, and we are about to have another factor enter into this. There is, we've all heard there's an effort to encourage the federal government to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And as I understand it, McDonald's is already testing an automated kitchen.
You mentioned this like 4 times, but you can mention it again.
I'm sorry.
Good.
But what that means is that the return on investment is being shortened for McDonald's.
Yeah.
And if you raise the minimum wage to $15, that makes it even shorter. But what do I know?
I feel like minimum wage is another interesting topic. It's like related because we're just talking about equalization in general. But the more you raise the minimum wage, the more companies invest in automation and therefore put the people out of work altogether. So that's a tricky
That's a problem.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, should we I think we talked about a lot of like cool things about sports. It was a good conversation. We talked a lot about different issues. I mean, there's surprisingly a lot to talk about when you talk about sports and try to get into these issues that it raises. Do you guys have any last like thoughts that you would like to share with our public, or should we end it here?
Were there other questions that we didn't touch upon? So I know there were like 7 of them, right? 6 or 7.
Yeah, no, I mean we kind of like covered the main aspects of it, I think.
Oh, that's one I find interesting is athletes like giving a political opinion or like donating money to a charity. Like when they use their fame, they try to use their fame like to influence for the good of society. That I find kind of interesting.
In my opinion, not every time, but most of the time when that happens, the person who is doing it they may not be fully aware of it, but they are exploiting the public's inability to tell the difference between celebrity and greatness. And because somebody is a good actor doesn't mean they have insight into good policy.
Definitely. Yeah. So like a lot of people,
because somebody is a good athlete doesn't mean they know anything about abortion or gun control. It's not a feature of their discipline to understand that. It's a feature of being human and being alive, but why should an athlete know any more about it than me?
Yeah, I agree with you fundamentally, but I do, and I but I do think that because you have power, I mean, there is some degree of responsibility that goes with that power, and sometimes these people, they believe that they need to serve the society and do good. Usually, it's about fighting discrimination, and in some cases, I agree with you. Maybe, yeah, they shouldn't say anything, but when you look at examples like Muhammad Ali, like he was trying to use his platform to criticize the war in Vietnam and promote racial equality and all that. And you see that with Naomi Osaka, for example. One of the big things is that she's a Black Lives Matter like advocate, in the sense that what is it that she does? She kind of like wears T-shirts with the names of the people allegedly killed by the police and all that. So, and the U.S. National women's soccer team, they're trying to promote the idea that there shouldn't be gender discrimination in pay, right? Like women should be paid the same for doing the same job, which I think is a good idea, So
But what if
I'm
they're
not I'm not so sure about in sports, actually. That's kind of like, that's why I feel conflicted about this women's soccer team, because I actually think I mostly don't agree with them in their case. I do agree with their message for the rest of society. So it's a weird, like, like a contradiction in my head.
Now, I did hear, I understand what you're saying. I did hear, and maybe this relates. I see the connection, but there was a state legislator in California that proposed a bill that didn't pass. But it is alarming that she was elected to the state legislature.
Mhm.
I'm sure it's not the first time, but she proposed a bill to create a law requiring men to urinate sitting down
Oh boy.
to promote equality.
what? That is the weirdest.
That is so fucking stupid. I'm sorry, I messed up your YouTube.
No, it's okay. I think it's just justified. I think
It's
it's
bizarre.
justified. Yeah, that's well, yeah. I mean, let's not get into that. No, that's terrible. I would say, but yeah, no, but I do think that, yeah, I agree with you. People should understand that these are not policymakers; these are athletes. But look, if I were an athlete and I had a big platform, I would probably try to use it, not necessarily for politics, but if I see some form of
Oh
discrimination,
yeah,
something that is important to me,
yeah,
I would try to do
I'm not
something
saying
about it.
that they shouldn't offer up an opinion or say anything, and I'm not even saying that they shouldn't use their celebrity to bring attention to a particular issue. Uh, what I'm suggesting is that we shouldn't attribute more uh, disproportionately to a political opinion of somebody because they're a celebrity.
Yes,
You
I
know,
agree.
Yeah, it's like Bruno. So um, they could use their status like if every athlete used it to be on the right side of I don't know what's good,
Mhm.
then we would all be for it because it's on the like the opinion is a good opinion, but inevitably the opinions of athletes are just as wrong as the average human being, right? So like what David is,
or right.
or right, yeah, they're just as right or wrong as the average human being. They're not more right than the average human being. So David is saying if an athlete's opinion is no more right than an average human, should we give it more weight? And then the question is, whose opinion is more right than the average human? So like,
Mine.
mine. I don't know. Maybe in matters of economics, we could say economists, their opinion would be more right than the average. In matters of in matters of a virus, we could say Fauci's opinion is more right than the average human. Hopefully, we would hope. But I think I feel very confident in that. But
Well, I mean,
yeah.
I think that's kind of an obvious one.
Yeah.
If not, I mean, he's a big fraud.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no other way about it.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's wrap it up, guys. It was a good discussion. I think we touched on some good things, some interesting aspects of it.
I don't think any of us are qualified to talk about sports.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
Bruno knows a little bit more than me, but
But as a spectator,
Well,
do
I
you
mean,
play anything?
I think we talked about the issues, issues surrounding sports. I mean, if we're talking about like the technicalities of some sporting technique, I mean, yeah, I would rather ask a professional athlete, but I think
No,
these issues are more about the nature of sports and society.
but there's different aspects of sports. So there's actually being able to be good at playing the game, which none of us are good at. Then you might not be good at playing it, but you might be good at strategizing. So you might be a good head coach. Like you could have so a lot of head coaches have played the sport before, but a lot of them have not. So you could be good at the strategy element of it without being able to play the sport at all. Then there's the next thing. You could not be good at the sport, not really know the strategy very well, but you could be good at the philosophy side of it. So yeah, maybe that's us.
Yeah, I think, I mean, for sure. I think some, a lot of these questions, it doesn't really matter how well you play or not a particular sport. I mean, these are more about, the nature of sports. And but anyways, thank you for discussing it, and
Thank you, Bruno.
we'll be back with the nature of work next week, the morality of work.
See you later.
Which I'm not a great worker either, but I'll talk about it.
All right. Have a good night.
Take care, guys. Thank
Bye.
you.